Lieutenant Commander Hyun-Woo Park stared at his computer screen in disbelief. The numbers made no sense. He rubbed his tired eyes and looked again, but the data remained the same. After 12 years working at the Coalition's Deep Space Surveillance Division, he had never seen anything like this. The signal came from the outer edge of known space, where nothing should exist except empty darkness and radiation. But this was not random noise from dying stars. This was a quantum signature, clean and precise, transmitted on frequencies that only one type of ship could produce. Hyun-Woo's hands shook as he pulled up the historical database. He typed in the signature pattern and waited. When the results appeared on his screen, his coffee cup slipped from his fingers and crashed to the floor. UES Invincible, humanity's first supercarrier. Lost 200 years ago. The ship had vanished during what historians called the Dark Crossing, humanity's first attempt to explore beyond the galactic spiral. 50,000 crew members had disappeared with it, including some of the finest minds humanity had ever produced. The Coalition had searched for months before declaring the ship destroyed and its crew dead. But now its quantum signature was broadcasting from impossible coordinates, as clear as if the ship had just left Earth yesterday. Hyun-Woo quickly copied the data to a secure drive and hurried through the sterile corridors of Nexus Prime Station. Other Coalition officers nodded politely as he passed. Humans were well liked here, known for their reliability and hard work. They were useful members of the galactic community, even if they lacked the advanced technology of species like the proud Valdari or the brilliant Zephyrians. Dr. So-Young Kim was in her laboratory when Hyun-Woo arrived, surrounded by ancient artifacts from dead civilizations. As the Coalition's leading expert on lost technology, she was the only person who could verify what he had found. "Dr. Kim, I need you to look at something," Hyun-Woo said, trying to keep his voice steady. So-Young looked up from a piece of crystalline metal that hummed with its own inner light. She was a small woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Commander." "Maybe I have." He handed her the data pad. "Can you authenticate this signature?" So-Young's expression changed as she read. Her scientific calm cracked, replaced by something close to wonder. "This is impossible. The Invincible was destroyed 2 centuries ago." "That's what I thought too. But the quantum resonance patterns match perfectly. Even the temporal displacement signatures are identical." So-Young ran the data through her analysis programs 3 times. Each scan confirmed what they both feared to believe. "If this is real," she said slowly, "then we need to contact Admiral Lee immediately." Admiral Tae-hyun Lee received their call from his flagship orbiting Earth. Even through the holographic transmission, they could see the shock on his weathered face. The Admiral had served in the Human Defense Fleet for 40 years and knew the Invincible's story better than anyone. "Are you certain about this data?" he asked. "As certain as we can be without physical examination," So-Young replied. "The signature is authentic. Either the Invincible survived somehow, or something is using its quantum resonance to send us a message." Admiral Lee was quiet for a long moment. The Invincible had been more than just a ship to humanity. It represented their hopes and dreams of taking their place among the stars. Its loss had been devastating, a reminder that humans were still newcomers to galactic civilization. "I'll need to present this to the Coalition Council," he said finally. "They won't believe it at first." He was right. When the evidence was presented to the Council 3 days later, the alien representatives reacted with skepticism and dismissal. High Commander Thex Kal of the Valdari Empire barely looked at the data before speaking. "Humans are known for their imagination," he said in his deep, rumbling voice. "Perhaps your sensors are malfunctioning. The Valdari have explored that region of space extensively. There is nothing there but cosmic dust." Scientist Prime Velmoth of the Zephyrian Collective was more diplomatic but equally doubtful. "The data is interesting, but correlation does not prove causation. Many ships use similar quantum engines. This could be debris from any number of vessels." The other species nodded in agreement. Humans were valuable allies, good soldiers, and reliable workers, but they were not known for technological breakthroughs or remarkable discoveries. If something as significant as a 200-year-old supercarrier had survived in deep space, Surely one of the more advanced races would have found it first. Only Ambassador Mi Jung Seo spoke in support of the human claim. With respect, counselors, my people have never made false reports to this body. If Commander Park and Dr. Kim believe this signal is authentic, it deserves investigation. The debate continued for hours. The Valdari wanted to dismiss the matter entirely, while the Zephyrians suggested a brief censor sweep of the region. Smaller species voiced concerns about wasting coalition resources on what they saw as human wishful thinking. Finally, a compromise was reached. A small expedition would be sent to investigate, led by coalition officers with human technical support. If nothing was found, the matter would be closed permanently. Captain Miran Choi volunteered her exploration vessel, the New Horizon, for the mission. She was one of the few human captains trusted with deep space exploration, known for her careful analysis and honest reporting. If anyone could find the truth, it would be her. As preparations began, Hyunwoo found himself assigned to the expedition as sensor specialist. The thought of actually finding the Invincible filled him with equal parts excitement and dread. If the ship had somehow survived 2 centuries in the void, what condition would it be in? What had happened to its crew? Dr. So Young packed her most advanced analysis equipment, determined to solve the mystery one way or another. She had spent her career studying the remnants of lost civilizations, but finding a piece of humanity's own history would be the discovery of a lifetime. Admiral Lee watched the New Horizon depart from Earth orbit with mixed feelings. Part of him hoped they would find nothing, that the signal was just an equipment malfunction or cosmic interference. The Invincible's loss had been painful enough the first time. Having hope raised and crushed again might be more than humanity could bear. But another part of him, the part that remembered the stories his grandfather told about the early days of space exploration, wanted desperately for the ship to be real. Humanity had always been the newcomers in galactic society, the species that arrived late and had to prove themselves worthy of respect. Finding the Invincible might change that perception forever. As the New Horizon jumped to hyperspace, carrying its mixed crew toward the outer darkness, none of them could imagine what they were about to discover. The signal that had started as an impossible reading on a computer screen was about to reshape everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity. In the depths of space, something waited for them. Something that had been human once, but had become something more through 2 centuries of impossible survival. The crew of the Invincible had not simply endured their exile from known space. They had learned, grown, and evolved into something that would challenge every assumption the galactic community held about the limitations of human potential. The expedition crew prepared for a routine investigation of sensor anomalies. They had no idea they were about to encounter the first evidence that humanity was capable of far more than anyone had ever imagined. The New Horizon dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Erebus Nebula, where sensors had detected the impossible signal. Captain Miran Choi stood on the bridge, watching the swirling clouds of gas and stellar dust that blocked their view of whatever lay beyond. "Sensor sweep complete, Captain," reported Hyunwoo from his station. "I'm reading massive energy signatures approximately 2 million kilometers ahead. The quantum resonance is getting stronger." Valdari Commander Thexcall paced behind them, his scaled hide reflecting the bridge lights. He had insisted on leading the expedition personally, convinced that humans were chasing shadows. "Nebula interference," he growled. "Your instruments are being fooled by radiation echoes." Dr. So-Young looked up from her analysis console. "The resonance pattern is too clean for interference. Whatever is out there, it's definitely artificial." Zephyrian scientist Prime Velmoth remained silent, but his large black eyes showed growing interest. The Zephyrians were known for their analytical minds, and even he could not explain away the data they were seeing. "Take us in slowly," Captain Choi ordered. "Full sensor alert. If there's really something out there, I want to know about it before we get too close." The New Horizon moved carefully through the nebula, its hull shimmering as it passed through pockets of charged particles. The crew watched their screens with growing amazement as the energy signatures became clearer and more defined. Then the nebula parted, and they saw it. The UES Invincible hung in space before them, but it was nothing like the ship that had vanished 2 centuries ago. The original Supercarrier had been impressive, nearly 2 kilometers long and bristling with weapons and docking bays. This vessel was 3 times that size, its hull gleaming with materials that seemed to absorb and redirect light in impossible ways. "By the ancestors," whispered Velmoth, the first words he had spoken since entering the nebula. "What has happened to your ship?" Captain Choi stared in stunned silence. The Invincible's basic structure was recognizable, but it had been transformed into something beyond human engineering. New sections had been added seamlessly, creating a design that was both familiar and completely alien. "Captain," Hyunwoo said, his voice barely steady, "I'm detecting life signs, thousands of them, and they're human." Commander Thexcall's confidence cracked. Impossible. No one could survive 2 centuries in deep space without coalition support systems. Before anyone could respond, their communications array came alive. A clear, strong signal cut through the nebula's interference, transmitted on frequencies that only Earth-built ships should know. "Coalition vessel New Horizon, this is Admiral Jin-A Song of the UES Invincible. Request permission to establish communications." The bridge fell completely silent. Every person present knew that name from the history books. Admiral Song had been the Invincible's commander when it vanished, one of humanity's greatest military leaders. She should have been dead for 200 years. Captain Choi found her voice first. "Admiral Song, this is Captain Miran Choi. We thought you were lost." The response came immediately, and the voice sounded exactly as it had in archived recordings from 2 centuries ago. "We were lost, Captain, but we were also found. Request permission to come aboard your vessel. There is much we need to discuss." Thexcal stepped forward. "This is some kind of trick. No one survives 2 centuries without aging. Your scientists must have created an artificial intelligence to fool us." "With respect, Commander," came Admiral Song's reply. "Artificial intelligence could not explain what you are about to witness. Prepare your docking bay. We are transmitting approach vectors now." A small craft detached from the transformed Invincible, moving with impossible grace through the nebula's charged particles. Its design was clearly based on human shuttles, but it incorporated elements that no human engineer had ever imagined. "The craft is phasing in and out of normal space," reported So Young, her scientific instruments struggling to track the vessel. "It's using some kind of dimensional displacement technology." "That's impossible," Velmoth said. "Dimensional manipulation requires energy levels that would destroy any ship attempting to generate them." The shuttle docked with barely a vibration, demonstrating control systems far beyond anything in the Coalition fleet. Minutes later, the airlock opened, and Admiral Song stepped aboard the New Horizon. She looked exactly as she had in the historical records. A tall woman with graying hair and sharp eyes, wearing a uniform that was recognizably human, but made from materials that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. Behind her came 2 other figures that the expedition crew recognized from their research. Chief Engineer Do-Hyun Kang and Dr. Yejin Ryu had also served aboard the original Invincible. Like Admiral Song, they showed no signs of aging beyond what they should have experienced 2 centuries ago. "Welcome aboard, Admiral." "Captain," Choi said, struggling to process what she was seeing. "How is this possible?" Admiral Song smiled, and there was something different in her expression. A depth of knowledge and experience that went far beyond normal human understanding. "Captain, what do you know about the predecessors?" "Ancient." "Myths," Thexcal said dismissively. "Stories primitive species tell about beings who transcended physical existence. Not myths," Dr. Ryu said quietly. "We met them." The conference room fell silent as Admiral Song began her story. She spoke of the Invincible's final jump, when their navigation systems had malfunctioned and sent them not to another star system, but to a place between dimensions where the normal laws of physics did not apply. "We thought we were going to die," she said. "Our life support was failing, and we had no way to return to normal space. Then they found us. The predecessors were beings who had evolved beyond physical form millions of years ago, existing as pure consciousness in dimensions that intersected with but remained separate from normal reality. They had been watching the younger races of the galaxy, waiting for a species that showed the right combination of traits. They tested us," Chief Engineer Kang explained. "Not our technology or our knowledge, but our ability to adapt and grow. They were impressed by how quickly we learned to modify our ship using principles that shouldn't exist. "What did they want from you?" Dr. So-Young asked. "Nothing," Admiral Song replied. "They offered us a choice. We could return to normal space, immediately, with our ship repaired and our memories intact, or we could stay and learn from them, becoming something more than human while remaining essentially human." "And you chose to stay?" Captain Choi asked. "Some of us did. Others returned to Coalition space years ago, quietly integrating back into human society. You would be surprised how many of your current leaders and scientists once served aboard this ship." Velmoth leaned forward, his analytical mind racing. "You claim to have been enhanced by beings of pure consciousness. Prove it." Admiral Song nodded to Dr. Ryu, who placed her hand on the conference table. The metal surface began to change, flowing like water before reshaping itself into a perfect three-dimensional map of the local star cluster. "We learned to manipulate matter at the quantum level," Dr. Ryu said simply. "Among other things." Commander Thexcal stood abruptly, his scales flushing with alarm. "This is impossible. Your species does not possess such capabilities." "You're right," Admiral Song said. "Baseline humans do not. But we are no longer baseline. Humans. We have been enhanced, evolved, guided by beings who understood the true potential that lay dormant in our species." The implications hit the expedition crew like a physical blow. If the Invincible's crew had been enhanced by ancient beings and had been quietly returning to human space for years, then humanity's technological and scientific advancement over the past 2 centuries might not have been natural development at all. "How many of you are there?" Captain Choi asked. "Here? About 40,000. But enhanced humans exist throughout Coalition space now, working in research facilities, military commands, and colonial governments. We have been preparing." "Preparing for what?" So-Young asked. Admiral Song's expression grew serious. "Something is coming from beyond the galactic rim. Something that devours entire star systems. The predecessors chose humanity not for conquest, but for defense. We are to be the galaxy's guardians in the war that is coming." The conference room erupted in shocked voices as the alien representatives tried to process this revelation. The humans they had considered useful but unremarkable allies were revealing capabilities that made their own advanced civilizations seem primitive in comparison. But perhaps most shocking of all was the realization that this transformation had been happening gradually for 2 centuries, and none of them had noticed. Enhanced humans had been among them all along, quietly guiding galactic development while preparing for a threat that none of the major powers had even suspected existed. The boarding party that crossed to the Invincible felt like explorers entering a dream. The ship's corridors were familiar yet transformed, built from materials that seemed to respond to thought and intention. Commander Thexacal kept touching the walls nervously, watching them shift color and texture under his scaled fingers. "The hull is alive," Dr. So-Young whispered, running her scanners over surfaces that hummed with their own energy. Its organic technology merged with mechanical systems. Chief Engineer Do-Hyun Kang led them through passages that reconfigured themselves as they walked. "We learned to grow our technology rather than simply build it," he explained. "The predecessors taught us that the distinction between living and non-living matter is an illusion." They entered what had once been the ship's main engineering section. Now it resembled something between a garden and a factory, with crystalline structures that pulsed with light and metal trees whose branches carried data streams instead of leaves. "This is impossible," Velmoth stated, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. "Organic technology of this sophistication would require millions of years to develop." Dr. Yejin Ryu smiled as she gestured to a console that grew from the floor at her approach. "Time flows differently in the spaces between dimensions. We experienced centuries while only decades passed in normal space. We had time to learn, to grow, to become something new." The tour continued through sections that defied easy description. Living quarters where the walls displayed images of Earth's sky and could simulate any environment the occupant desired. Laboratories where scientists worked with equations that existed in more than 3 dimensions. Training facilities where humans moved with impossible grace and speed. Captain Choi stopped at an observation deck where she could see the ship's new sections spreading out like wings. How many people live here now? 43,512, Admiral. Song replied precisely, including children born during our journey between dimensions. They have capabilities that even we find remarkable. As if summoned by her words, a young woman approached them through the observation deck. She looked about 20 years old, with the black hair and dark eyes common among humans. But there was something different about the way she moved, as if gravity had less hold on her than it should. Commander Hye-Won Jeon, Admiral Song said, our current tactical officer. She was born in the space between dimensions. Hye-Won bowed politely to the guests. Welcome aboard the Invincible. Admiral Song asked me to demonstrate some of our defensive capabilities. Before anyone could ask what she meant, alarms began sounding throughout the Coalition fleet. Captain Choi's communicator crackled to life with urgent reports from the New Horizon. Captain, we're detecting weapons lock from multiple Coalition vessels, came the voice of her first officer. The Valdari and Zephyrian ships are powering up their main guns. Thexcal's scales flushed dark red with anger. You lied to us. This is a trap. No trap, Admiral Song said calmly. Your ships are simply responding to their fear. They see something. They don't understand, so they default to violence. Through the observation deck's transparent walls, they could see the Coalition fleet arranging itself in attack formation, the pride of 3 different civilizations, ships that represented centuries of technological advancement, preparing to destroy what they could not comprehend. You must stop them, Captain Choi said urgently. They'll destroy themselves trying to fight you. Will they? Hye-Won asked, almost curious. She placed her hand on a control surface that materialized from thin air. Let's see. The first salvo came from the Valdari dreadnought Thunder of Ages, its particle beams capable of cracking a planet's crust. The weapon struck the Invincible directly, their energy readings off every scale the Coalition used to measure destructive power. The beams simply vanished. Dimensional displacement, Dr. Ryu explained as the alien representatives stared in shock. The energy is redirected to uninhabited space several star systems away. The Zephyrian vessels fired next, using gravity weapons that could crush a moon into a marble. The gravitational waves bent around the Invincible like water around a stone, leaving the ship completely unaffected. Energy manipulation at the quantum level, Hye-Won said casually. We learned that all forces are simply different expressions of the same fundamental reality. Ship after ship fired, each using the most advanced weapons their civilization had developed. Plasma cannons, antimatter, missiles, reality distortion fields, weapons that existed only in the theoretical arsenals of the most advanced species. Nothing had any effect on the transformed human vessel. Stop this, Velmoth said, his analytical mind overwhelmed by what he was witnessing. They will exhaust their weapons systems and leave themselves defenseless. Actually, Hye-Won said, they're about to try something that could damage their own ships. Perhaps a demonstration is in order. The Invincible didn't fire weapons. Instead, it simply moved. One moment it was hanging motionless in space, absorbing the combined firepower of a Coalition fleet. The next, it was simultaneously present at 6 different locations, each image solid and real, according to every sensor. In the fleet. Multi-dimensional presence, Admiral Song explained as the Coalition ships scrambled to track targets that existed in multiple realities at once. We learned to exist in several dimensional states simultaneously. The demonstration lasted exactly 30 seconds. Then the Invincible returned to a single location, hanging peacefully in space as if nothing had happened. The Coalition fleet's weapons fell silent, their crews struggling to process what they had witnessed. How? Was all Thexcal could manage to say. The predecessors taught us that consciousness shapes reality more than we realized, Dr. Ryu said. What you call impossible, we learned to see as simply improbable. And improbable things happen all the time. Captain Choi's communicator buzzed with frantic calls from the fleet commanders, demanding explanations for what they had witnessed. She ignored them, focusing on a more immediate concern. You said enhanced humans have been returning to Coalition space for years. How many? And what have they been doing? Admiral Song smiled. More than you might think. Do you remember the breakthrough? In quantum computing 15 years ago? The development of self-repairing hull materials? The new navigation systems that cut hyperspace travel time in half? Those were joint research projects, Velmoth said slowly. Multiple species working together. Yes, Dr. Ryu agreed. But guided by humans who understood principles the other species couldn't quite grasp. We've been helping the galaxy advance, preparing it for what's coming. And what exactly is coming? So, Young asked. Chief Engineer Kang gestured to a wall display that showed the galaxy from an impossible perspective, as if viewed from outside space and time. At the very edge of the display, dark shapes moved between the stars. Devourers, he said simply. Entities that consume entire star systems, converting matter and energy into forms that exist outside normal reality. They've already destroyed 17 galaxies in this local cluster. Ours is next. The alien representatives stared at the display in growing horror. The dark shapes were massive beyond comprehension, each one capable of reducing a solar system to empty space in a matter of hours. The predecessors faced them billions of years ago, Admiral Song continued. They survived by transcending physical existence, but they couldn't stop the Devourers entirely. They could only slow them down and hope that younger races would eventually develop the ability to fight back. And they chose humanity for this task? Captain Choi asked. They chose several species over the millennia. Most failed the tests, lacking the psychological flexibility to survive enhancement. Others succeeded, but lost themselves in the process, becoming something cold and alien. But humans were different, Hewan added. We could change without losing what made us human. We could become more while remaining ourselves. The implications were staggering. Humanity, the species most coalition members considered useful but unremarkable, had been selected by ancient beings to defend the galaxy against a threat that could destroy all known civilization. How long do we have? Velmoth asked, his scientific mind already working on the problem. The first wave will reach the outer rim in approximately 8 standard years, Dr. Ryu replied. We've been using that time to prepare, to enhance as many humans as possible, and develop the technologies we'll need. But why keep it secret? Captain Choi asked. Why not tell the coalition what was coming? Admiral Song's expression grew sad. Because fear makes people do foolish things. If the major powers knew the truth, they would either panic and destroy themselves in preparation, or they would try to destroy us, believing that eliminating the enhanced humans would somehow make the threat disappear. As if to prove her point, urgent messages began flooding in from coalition command centers across the galaxy. News of the Invincible's return and humanity's revealed capabilities was spreading faster than containment protocols could manage. Some species were calling for immediate military action against human colonies. Others were demanding access to enhancement technologies. None were responding with the calm cooperation that would be needed to face the coming crisis. The demonstration was over, but the real test was just beginning. The emergency session of the Coalition Council convened within hours of the first reports from the Erebus Nebula. Representatives from 47 species gathered in the Great Chamber on Nexus Prime, their voices creating a chaos of fear, anger, and desperate demands for action. Counselor Mi Jung-seo sat alone at the human delegation table, watching as her former allies transformed into something approaching an angry mob. She had served the coalition faithfully for 15 years, building relationships and trust that now seemed to crumble with every passing minute. The humans have deceived us for centuries, declared High Commander Thex Cal, his massive form dominating the central platform. They have allowed us to believe them weak, while secretly developing weapons that make our entire fleet obsolete. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Valdari Empire had built its power on technological superiority, and the revelation that humans possessed capabilities beyond their understanding had shaken them to their core. Scientist Prime Velmoth spoke with his usual measured tone, but there was an undercurrent of fear in his words. The implications are clear, If humans have been enhanced by beings they call predecessors, then our entire understanding of galactic evolution is flawed. We have been children playing with toys while they developed capabilities we cannot comprehend. The smaller species were even more frightened. Representative Kixta of the Harmony Collective spoke for many when she said, "How do we know this enhancement is not a form of infection? How do we know it will not spread to our populations and change us into something we no longer recognize?" Counselor. CO finally stood, requesting permission to speak. The chamber fell silent. 46 pairs of alien eyes focused on the lone human representative. "Honored colleagues," she began, "I understand your fear and confusion. I share it. Until yesterday, I knew nothing of the Invincible's survival or the existence of enhanced humans among our population." "Lies," hissed Diplomat Zarthul of the A Crystal Imperium. "How could such massive changes occur without human leadership being aware?" "Because," CO replied calmly, "the enhanced humans you fear have been working quietly to help all our civilizations advance. The medical breakthroughs that extended Valdari lifespans by 30%? The new agricultural techniques that ended? The Zephyrian food crisis? The trade routes that brought prosperity to the outer colonies? All guided by human insights you now know came from their enhanced understanding." The chamber erupted in angry voices. If humans had been secretly manipulating galactic development for centuries, what else had they hidden? What other capabilities did they possess? News feeds across Coalition space carried the story with growing hysteria. On Valdari Prime, massive demonstrations demanded immediate military action against human colonies. The Zephyrian Council authorized emergency research into weapons specifically designed to target human enhancement technologies. Dr. Namgyu Lim, chief science officer aboard the research station Deep Thought, watched the protests on Zephyrian homeworld with growing concern. He was one of the enhanced humans Admiral Song had mentioned, returned from the Invincible decades ago to help guide Coalition scientific development. "Dr. Lim," his assistant called out, "the station commander is requesting your immediate presence in the main conference room." Namgyu knew what was coming. Orders to surrender himself for examination. Demands that he reveal the secrets of human enhancement, perhaps even arrest. The fear was spreading faster than reason, and enhanced humans throughout Coalition space were being identified and detained. Meanwhile, at the human colony of New Seoul, Colonel Dongwoo Shin received urgent warnings from Earth Command. Long-range sensors were detecting Coalition fleet movements toward human settlements. The message was clear: "Prepare for the worst." "Sir," reported his intelligence officer, "we're tracking at least 15 Valdari battle groups moving toward the outer colonies. Their formation suggests offensive rather than defensive deployment." Dongwoo studied the tactical displays with growing dread. New Seoul was a peaceful agricultural world with minimal defenses. If the Coalition decided to make an example of human colonies, his people would be helpless against modern warships. What he didn't know was that New Seoul, like many human colonies, was home to several dozen enhanced humans who had integrated quietly into the community. Engineer Jia Young-han ran the colony's power systems and had subtly improved their efficiency using principles she had learned in the spaces between dimensions. Pilot Kyung-min Yu delivered supplies to the outer settlements and had modified her transport ship in ways that made it faster and more reliable than standard Coalition designs. They had lived normal lives, contributing to their communities while carefully hiding abilities that would have caused panic if revealed. Now that secrecy was about to be shattered. Back on Nexus Prime, the Coalition Council was moving toward a decision that would reshape galactic politics forever. A resolution was being drafted that would require all humans to submit to medical examination and technological analysis. Enhanced humans would be detained indefinitely while their capabilities were studied and their intentions determined. "This is not about fear," insisted Councillor Velmoth as he presented the resolution. "This is about survival. We cannot coexist with a species that possesses capabilities we cannot understand or counter." Captain Subin Yang of Coalition Intelligence had been monitoring communications throughout human space since the crisis began. Her reports painted a picture of a species under siege, with enhanced humans being identified and hunted while normal humans faced growing hostility from their alien neighbors. "The situation is deteriorating rapidly," she reported to Admiral Lee. "Enhanced humans are disappearing from their positions in Coalition institutions. Some have been arrested, others have simply vanished. We estimate that over 3,000 have been identified so far." Admiral Lee listened to the reports with growing anger. Humanity had served the Coalition faithfully for 2 centuries, contributing blood and resources to defend galactic civilization. Now they were being treated as enemies because they possessed capabilities their allies found threatening. "What? About the colonies?" he asked. "Valdari fleets are moving into position around 12 human settlements," Yang replied. "Their stated mission is protective observation, but their formations suggest preparation for orbital bombardment. The crisis was spiraling beyond anyone's ability to control. Fear was overriding centuries of cooperation and trust, turning allies into enemies and friends into threats." On the Invincible, Admiral Song watched the developing situation with sadness, but not surprise. The predecessors had warned that this moment would come, when humanity's true nature was revealed and their former allies turned against them in fear. "Should we intervene?" asked Commander Haiwan John. "We could disable the Coalition fleets before they reach the colonies." "Not yet," Song replied. "If we act now, we prove their fears correct. We become the aggressors, the threat they believe us to be." Dr. Yejin Ryu joined them on the observation deck, her expression troubled. "The enhancement process cannot be forced or rushed. If they demand access to our technologies, many who attempt the transformation will be destroyed by it. And if they succeed in suppressing us," added Chief Engineer Kang, "who will stand against the Devourers when they arrive?" The irony was terrible and complete. In their fear of humanity's enhanced capabilities, the Coalition was destroying the very force that had been secretly protecting them for 2 centuries. The galaxy's defenders were being hunted by the civilization they had sworn to defend. But perhaps most tragic of all was the realization that this crisis was exactly what the approaching Devourers would hope for. A galaxy divided against itself, too busy fighting internal wars to prepare for the external threat that would soon consume them all. The vote was scheduled for the following day. Unless something changed dramatically, the Coalition would officially declare enhanced humans a threat to galactic security, authorizing military action to contain or eliminate them. Humanity's greatest test was no longer the approaching darkness from beyond the rim. It was whether they could find a way to save a galaxy that no longer wanted to be saved. The attack on New Sol came without warning, launched by the Valdari Empire as a demonstration of their determination to contain the human threat. 3 dreadnoughts and 15 support vessels dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, their weapons already charging for orbital bombardment. "All civilian transports, evacuate immediately," broadcast Admiral Kexavar from the flagship Eternal Dominion. "You have 1 hour to abandon the colony before we begin cleansing operations." Colonel Dongwu Shin stood in the emergency command center, watching helplessly as enemy ships arranged themselves in attack formation. New Sol had no significant defenses beyond a few patrol craft and some outdated shield generators. Against Valdari dreadnoughts, they might as well throw rocks. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "civilian evacuation ships are requesting military escort. They're afraid the Valdari will fire on fleeing transports." Dongwu closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 50,000 lives depending on decisions he was not equipped to make. "Launch all available fighters. Do what you can to buy time." 12 human fighters rose from New Sol's surface, their pilots knowing they flew toward certain death. Against Valdari warships, their small craft would last perhaps minutes, but they climbed toward the enemy anyway, because that was what humans did when faced with impossible odds. The first wave of orbital bombardment began exactly 1 hour after the Valdari deadline. Particle beams designed to crack fortress walls struck the colony's shields, overloading them instantly and beginning the systematic destruction of humanity's agricultural paradise. Then, something impossible happened. Engineer Jia Young-han stood in the colony's main power facility, her hands pressed against control panels that were responding to her thoughts rather than her touch. The enhancement she had hidden for 15 years suddenly blazed to life, connecting her consciousness to every system in the colony. "All defense grids, emergency activation," she whispered, and her words became reality. Shield generators that should have been destroyed began rebuilding themselves, their energy patterns shifting into configurations that Valdari weapons could not penetrate. Power flows that had seemed chaotic suddenly revealed themselves as part of a vast design, converting the colony's entire infrastructure into a single massive defensive system. In orbit, Admiral Kexavar watched his instruments with growing disbelief. The human colony should have been reduced to smoking craters, but his weapons were having no effect. Energy readings from the planet's surface showed impossible spikes as basic systems transformed into something his sensors could not identify. "Increase bombardment intensity," he ordered. "Focus all firepower on the primary population centers." The Valdari dreadnoughts unleashed their full destructive potential, enough energy to sterilize a continent. The beams struck the colony's enhanced shields and simply vanished, redirected into dimensional spaces where they could harm nothing. On the planet's surface, pilot Kyungmin Yu felt the awakening of her own hidden abilities. Her modified transport ship had always been faster and more agile than standard Coalition designs, but now it became something that defied every law of physics she had once accepted. She launched from New Seoul's spaceport in a craft that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its hull phasing in and out of normal space as it climbed toward the Valdari fleet. The enemy ships tried to target her, but their weapons could not lock onto something that refused to remain in a single reality. "What is that thing?" demanded Kexvar, as the impossible human craft danced between his dreadnoughts, moving through solid matter as if it were empty space. The enhanced humans of New Seoul were awakening to their true nature, dropping the careful disguises they had maintained for decades. Teacher Minho Cha turned the colony's communication arrays into a weapon that broadcast pure information into Valdari computer systems, overwhelming their artificial intelligences with concepts they could not process. Dr. Ye Yun Yun reached out with her consciousness and began healing the wounded before their injuries could become fatal. Her enhanced understanding of biology allowing her to accelerate natural healing processes beyond normal limits. But the most dramatic transformation occurred in space above the colony, where the 12 human fighters that had launched to certain death suddenly became something unprecedented. The pilots felt their enhanced abilities awakening under the stress of combat, their consciousness expanding to embrace their ships as extensions of their own bodies. Fighter craft that should have been destroyed in the first moments of battle began moving with impossible grace, their hulls shifting and adapting to absorb energy weapons while their own systems evolved in real time. "Sir," reported the Valdari tactical officer, "our weapons are having no effect. The human fighters are adapting." Admiral Kexvar watched his displays with growing alarm. The small human craft were not just evading his weapons. They were learning from each attack, their defensive systems becoming more sophisticated with every passing second. "Launch all fighters," he ordered. "Deploy boarding craft. If we cannot destroy them at range, we will take their ships and learn their secrets." The Valdari response force numbered over 200 fighters and assault craft, representing the finest military technology their empire had developed. They swarmed toward the 12 enhanced human pilots with overwhelming numerical superiority. The battle that followed could not be described using conventional military terminology. The human fighters moved through space like living beings, their hulls flowing and reshaping themselves to meet each threat. They existed in multiple locations simultaneously, attacked from impossible angles, and demonstrated technologies that made Valdari science seem primitive, but more than their impossible abilities. It was their coordination that truly shocked the enemy observers. The 12 pilots moved as one mind while retaining their individual personalities, their consciousness linked by enhancement technologies that allowed perfect cooperation without loss of identity. Within minutes, the Valdari fighter force was disabled rather than destroyed, their weapon systems selectively removed while their life support remained intact. The human pilots could have killed them all, but chose mercy even in the face of attempted genocide. "Admiral," reported the Valdari communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface." Colonel Dongwoo Shin appeared. On their screens, standing in a command center that glowed with energy patterns no Coalition engineer could duplicate. Behind him, the enhanced humans of New Seoul worked quietly to transform their entire world into something that could not be, conquered by conventional force. "Admiral Kexavar," Shin said calmly, "you came here to demonstrate Valdari power and human weakness. Instead, you have revealed the truth that we hope to keep hidden. We are not your enemies, but we are no longer your subjects either." "What are you?" Kexavar demanded. Before Shin could answer, space around the Valdari fleet began to distort. The UES Invincible emerged from dimensions that had no names, appearing simultaneously at multiple locations around the enemy ships. Admiral Song's voice filled every communication channel in the system. We are what humanity becomes when necessity demands evolution. We are the guardians you never knew you needed, facing threats you cannot imagine. The Invincible's arrival was broadcast across Coalition space, where similar awakenings were occurring on dozens of human worlds. Enhanced humans who had hidden among normal populations for decades were revealing themselves, transforming ordinary colonies into fortresses that conventional weapons could not touch. This is not conquest, Admiral Song continued, her words reaching every Coalition command center simultaneously. This is preparation. Something approaches from beyond the galactic rim that will destroy everything we have built unless we stand together. To prove her point, the Invincible's sensors projected images into space above New Sol. The same display that had shocked the expedition crew in the Erebus Nebula now appeared where every ship in the system could see it. The Devourers moved between distant stars like living darkness, consuming entire solar systems and converting their matter into forms that existed outside normal reality. Even at maximum magnification, they were too large to comprehend, entities that made galactic civilizations seem like insects. They will arrive in less than 8 years, Song announced. We can face them together, or we can waste what time remains, fighting each other while they approach. Admiral Kexavar stared at the projection with growing horror. His military mind understood the implications immediately. Against enemies of such scale and power, even the combined might of the Coalition would be helpless unless they possessed technologies beyond current understanding. How do we fight such things? He asked, his voice stripped of its former arrogance. By becoming more than we are, replied Admiral Song. By accepting that survival sometimes requires transformation. The demonstration was over, but the real choice was just beginning. The galaxy would either unite behind humanity's enhanced defenders, or it would face extinction divided and afraid. The aftermath of the New Sol incident sent shockwaves through every Coalition government. Admiral Kexvar's complete tactical report reached Valdari High Command within hours, describing human capabilities that rendered their most advanced weapons useless. Similar reports flooded in from across the galaxy as enhanced humans revealed themselves on dozens of worlds. Ambassador Hyrin Cho stood before the reformed Coalition Council 3 weeks later, addressing representatives who no longer saw humanity as junior partners, but as something far more complex and powerful. The Great Chamber was quieter now, the angry voices replaced by careful consideration of an impossible situation. Honored colleagues, she began, we face a choice that will determine whether our civilizations survive the next decade. We can continue to view humanity's evolution as a threat, or we can accept it as our salvation. High Commander Thex Kal, his pride severely damaged by the failure at New Sol, spoke with reluctant respect. Your enhanced humans demonstrated capabilities beyond our understanding. But can we trust beings who have hidden among us for centuries, guiding our development? Without our knowledge, trust must be earned through actions, Cho replied. Judge us by what we have done, not by the secrecy that survival demanded. She activated a holographic display that showed galactic development over the past 2 centuries. Every major breakthrough in science, medicine, and technology was highlighted, revealing patterns that had been invisible until now. The Zephyrian cure for solar plague that saved billions of lives, she said as data flowed across the display. The Valdari breakthrough in gravity manipulation that revolutionized space travel. The agricultural techniques that ended famine in the outer colonies. All were guided by enhanced humans, working quietly among your scientists and engineers. Scientist Prime Velmoth studied the data with his characteristic analytical precision. You claim to have accelerated our development to prepare for an approaching threat. But how do we know this threat is real and not a fabrication to justify your deception? The answer came from an unexpected source. Deep space monitoring stations across the galaxy had been detecting increasingly strong gravitational anomalies from beyond the rim. Professor Jung-Ho Kang of the Zephyrian Science Institute presented his findings to the Council with evident fear. The gravitational distortions are consistent with massive objects moving at significant fractions of light speed, he reported. Whatever is approaching possesses enough mass to disrupt stellar orbits from light years away. Dr. Minho Cha, one of the enhanced humans who had revealed himself after New Soul, provided additional evidence. His consciousness could perceive dimensions beyond normal space-time, allowing him to observe the approaching entities directly. They are not ships or constructs as we understand them, he explained to the stunned assembly. They are living extensions of a collective intelligence that consumes matter and energy to fuel its expansion across the universe. They have already destroyed 17 galaxies in this local cluster. The projection system in the council chamber activated, showing images that strained the limits of what normal minds could process. The Devourers appeared as vast shadows moving between stars, their true forms existing in dimensions that overlapped, with but remained separate from normal reality. "How long do we have?" asked Representative Kixta of the Harmony Collective, her voice small in the face of such overwhelming threat. 7 years, 4 months, 18 days, replied Dr. Cha with precision that came from enhanced perception. The first scout entities will reach the galactic rim then. The main force will arrive approximately 6 months later. The council chamber fell silent as the full implications sank in. All their wars, politics, and territorial disputes meant nothing in the face of an enemy that could consume entire star systems. Ambassador Cho stepped forward. This is why the predecessors chose humanity, not for conquest, but for defense. We offer to share the enhancement process with any species, willing to undergo the transformation. What does this transformation entail? Asked Counselor Velmoth. Admiral Song materialized in the chamber through dimensional projection, her image solid and present despite the Invincible being thousands of light years away. Enhancement requires psychological flexibility above all. Else, the subject must be willing to change fundamental assumptions about reality while maintaining their essential identity. She gestured, and the chamber filled with images of the enhancement process. Volunteers from various species undergoing transformation, some successfully, others failing when their minds could not adapt to expanded consciousness. The success rate varies by species, Song explained. Humans have approximately an 80% success rate due to our psychological adaptability. Zephyrians achieve 60% success because of their analytical flexibility. Valdari, she paused diplomatically, have a lower success rate due to their rigid mindset, but those who succeed become formidable defenders. Instructor Ji Hoon, CEO, appeared alongside Admiral Song, his form flickering between normal appearance and something that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. I operate the primary training facility on Kepler Station. We have successfully enhanced volunteers from 12 different species, though the process requires careful preparation and willing participation. And if we refuse? Asked Thexcall.combat specialist Ye Yun Yun, answered from her position aboard a patrol ship near the galactic rim. Then you face the Devourers with conventional weapons and normal consciousness. Based on our analysis of their capabilities, unenhanced civilizations have a survival rate approaching 0. The debate continued for days as species representatives consulted with their home governments. Some embraced the enhancement offer immediately, recognizing that survival trumped pride. Others demanded extensive testing and verification before committing their people to such radical transformation. Dr. Bo-Ra Moon led the research teams studying enhancement techniques, working to develop modified processes that could accommodate different species' psychological and biological requirements. Her laboratory on Luna became a center of unprecedented cooperation as scientists from across the galaxy worked together to prepare for the coming war. Captain Seung-Jin Hong coordinated the defense preparations from his command ship Navigators, Will, which existed partially in normal space and partially in the dimensional realms where enhanced humans could perceive approaching threats. His navigation techniques allowed coalition fleets to move through space using routes that conventional sensors could not detect. The Devourers use normal spacetime as a highway, he explained to mixed species fleet commanders. But they cannot easily follow targets that shift between dimensional states. Enhanced ships can attack from angles that do not exist in three-dimensional space. Training centers were established on a dozen worlds, where volunteers from across coalition space learned to expand their consciousness and adapt their thinking to accommodate impossible realities. The failure rate was significant, but those who succeeded emerged with capabilities that made them valuable additions to humanity's growing force of defenders. Not all species embraced the new paradigm. The crystalline Imperium closed their borders and began developing weapons specifically designed to target enhanced humans, believing they could find a technological solution that did not require personal transformation. Several smaller species attempted to flee toward the galactic core, hoping to outrun the approaching threat. But for every species that rejected cooperation, 2 others stepped forward to join the defense effort. The galaxy was reshaping itself around the reality that survival required evolution, that facing an impossible enemy demanded becoming something more than they had been. 5 years before the Devourer's arrival, the first mixed species crew of enhanced defenders departed on the deep space vessel Pioneer's Hope, commanded by Captain Wu Jin Yang and crewed by beings who had transformed themselves to meet an unimaginable challenge. Their mission was simple: intercept the approaching scouts and demonstrate that this galaxy would not fall as easily as the 17 that had come before. They carried weapons that existed in multiple dimensions, shields that drew power from the fabric of space-time itself, and the determination of species that had chosen transformation over extinction. Behind them, the galaxy prepared for a war that would determine whether intelligence and consciousness would survive in this corner of the universe, or whether the darkness between dimensions would consume everything that had ever thought, dreamed, or hoped for something better than mere existence. Humanity had gone from being the galaxy's useful servants to its unlikely saviors, not through conquest or superior technology, but through their greatest gift, the ability to change, grow, and remain essentially themselves, even while becoming something far more than they had ever imagined possible.